Oh, hello, and welcome to Al Dente Rigamortis. I'm Review Cultist.
Mikey, the E's to enter evil.
I'm the gamer in yellow.
And we're here to discuss those internet stories, most creepy and most pasta, and be critically silly doing it. And tonight we have Nostalgia Trip. So, we're doing this story called Nostalgia Trip because its author, Icydice, from creepypasta.wiki, sent us an email saying that they listened to our show and they wanted us to discuss their story because they liked our show. And I was like, really?
Just remember, you literally asked for this.
Yes. Icydice, you literally did. So, yeah, I believe in the email they told me this was a this was their attempt at a video game pasta. Mm-hmm. So, but without further ado, you can check out Nostalgia Trip on creepypasta.wiki. And I will dive into my rundown. So, our character, our protagonist, we get a name, we get a whole life story.
Right.
Like in the first paragraph. Yeah. Jeremy is starting this blog to break up the stress and monotony of college life, introducing himself and talking about nostalgia for simpler times and as a sort of a focus topic of his blog. As such, the following story is laid out through various entries from the blog. He goes into this discovery he made while looking at old stuff in his attic. Like he found a box full of his childhood things, such as a camera with a bunch of photos of him and this kid that he doesn't recall at all, and a bag with a DS in it, and with a game cartridge that has no like writing or anything on it, but there's a game on the cartridge that's called Township Village, and it brings back a whole bunch of memories from Jeremy for like playing this game back in the day. So he starts like kind of giving it a try and such. We then get a bit of a deep dive of this game, like sort of like your traditional Vigipasta scenario where like we get kind of almost like a let's play like written up of different levels and stuff like that. It's similar to Animal Crossing, but seems custom with Jeremy's old character and strangely no one else in the world except for this figure named Mr. O, who looms over Jeremy's character and follows him around everywhere. And the world itself is sort of constructed from like a bunch of mishmash areas that Jeremy remembers from his childhood, like his old school and his house and such.
Not gonna lie, when I first saw the name Mr. O, I thought it was Mr. Zero.
Okay, fair.
Don't blame the font. That was just me being derp.
I mean, that's fair.
Wow.
I didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean like that.
I know it's fine.
Okay. He encounters strange things that hint at his past, and as Jeremy investigates the game, the DS, and inquiring with his mom and online about the said game, he begins to uncover something potentially very sinister about his past. It seems that whoever this Mr. O is and whoever made this game, they were present in Jeremy's childhood, but he has no recollection of them or those encounters. There's even some mildly disturbing photos that taken of Jeremy as a child from someone much taller than he is on his DS and like on the game card. I believe on the camera itself, but more predominantly like the more distressing is on the DS or the photos on the DS. As they link kind of to different like secret levels in the game that he is able to unlock when interacting with this Mr. O character. And yeah, like the levels are sort of like locked to like, he has to interact with Mr. O, and this character also has this like eerie attachment to Jeremy's character and to Jeremy, constantly stating that they love him and that he should keep this a secret, and if he's good, he'll get a reward and the like. So
totally not skeevy at all.
Yeah, no, not at all. This game and the investigation begins to affect Jeremy's mental state, with nightmares and paranoia plaguing him, and it doesn't help that it seems his mother is hiding something from him. regarding regarding Mr. O. And this sort of like continues to gestate until he
Burst
is
from his chest.
God damn it.
Sorry, wrong franchise.
Until wait, did you read the right creepypasta?
Totally.
Shit.
It was the Aliens nostalgia one, right?
Shit.
Whoops.
Yeah, nostalgia trip to Hadley's Hope.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is until he is contacted by the mystery friend from the photos, Sammy. Sam has found the forum post Jeremy had left online, inquiring about Township Village, and asks to meet him to explain what happened and who made the game. When they meet, Sam explains that Mr. O is Sam's father, and that he is a pedophile who took a gross interest in Jeremy when they were kids. He had a software and engineering background, and when Jeremy left the DS at Sammy's house one day, Mr. O saw it and saw it as a way to groom Jeremy, and get closer to him. So he took an Animal Crossing game that he bought and modified it to kind of have this weird, creepy, like sort of like brainwashy adventure in it for this kid. He's now serving jail time, and it is discovered that his actions were indirectly the cause of the suicide of not only Sammy's mom, but Jeremy's dad, who was mentioned earlier as passing, and not really, and like early on in Jeremy's childhood. Jeremy's mom comes clean after he confronts her that the reason she never told Jeremy about what happened was because it seemed like he had suppressed the memories, and she couldn't bring herself to remind him of the trauma. So she thought it was better this way, and she was trying to protect him from the truth. Dealing with all of this, Jeremy takes some time and eventually decides to not play the game any further, like not giving the creator it's like that kind of like satisfaction of like having this game be played, or like to its completion, like getting into those secret or like locked level areas, and just throws the cartridge away. Like just puts it in the trash. The truth is out for him, and it can't be unknown, or it can't be it can't it can't be unknown. Yeah, it can't be forgotten. It can't be re-forgotten. But he begins to reconcile with this, and even decides to stay in touch with Sam, who has also been hurting as a result of this whole situation.
Sorry for laughing, but my brain goes weird ways. Be for Forgotten is coincidentally also the place where I get my weed.
God damn it!
It's very on the down low. They're very sneaky about it.
Yeah. And yeah, so Sammy and Jeremy decide to get a coffee and catch up on better things, and that's kind of where the story ends off. So, with that out of the way, we shall move on to Everyone Tolerates the Grammar Inquisitions! At this point, I've got a couple. So, the first thing I'm going to comment on is the way the blog entries are sort of like capped off, or like the way like they have like they're sort of separated. There's usually just like a bracketed like message like this page is awaiting further updates. Check back in once in a while to catch the next one. I sort of wish that the log entries had a date and time rather than this update message alone. Like, I mean, you can keep the update message, but like I kind of wanted some continuity, like some chronological. Wow, I just can't. Chronological, yeah. I just want some chronological continuity of like when things were happening. And it also helps to like sort of differentiate these as separate entries than the little bracketed bit. But yeah,
actually,
that's
or twice after when I was scrolling back and forth trying to find stuff, I had to find this specific part where it's saying check back later, because it's all the same one, so it's hard to differentiate. Some of them are slightly different, but most of them are
Yeah,
the same ones.
Yeah, especially since like this is all of the blog, as far as I can tell. Like, there's no hint that like there are other blog entries between like the ones that we're reading. So, yeah, it could easily just be like all of the blog entries and just give us like some sort of like way of differentiating each blog entry a little bit better. Especially since like later I kind of figured out roughly when this takes place. So, but I digress. I'll move on to my next Grammar Inquisition. Other pictures contained various items like my backpack or my Hot Wheels race car track. So hard to pronounce like what's wrong there, but race car is supposed to be two separate words. It's not one word, or it's not a compound word.
Oh.
And my next one here, I sat motionless and gawked at the name associated with the account I was about to reach out to. So I think it's supposed to say, and gawked at the name associated with the account I was about to reach out to.
Yeah, it sounds
Like, it's just like like replace the that's and give it a 2. So, but that is my Grammar Inquisition. So Mikey, the E stands for evil. Take it away.
I have a conjunction junction.
Okay. And next stop, conjunction junction. Doot, doot. That's your cue.
It, just like everything else in the box, hadn't been touched in years. It had been years since I even thought about that game, let alone played it. So, one of the primary mechanics of the game is the ability to jot down notes in in-game journals. It took me a bit more searching to figure out why that character was in my house. It was just him and I in this world, alone. It was him, all right. It's nice having my humble little corner on the internet. It was never of much concern to her. Kids can be quite moody. So, as I witnessed the faint glow of the DS screen, I spam-clicked my way through the main menu and hastily opened the game application. It had been locked shut from the outside as well. It was left wide open as well. It was as if the mere thought of doing so cultivated a strong reaction deep inside my gut. It was clear to me that she hadn't been sleeping well. It invokes a kind of communal feeling, don't you think? And again, it only grew louder. It was then that I launched upright in bed, my forehead drenched in sweat. So, yeah, sorry about this. It was relieving to take a break from my organized world and revisit one where nothing really mattered. It was as if I was crying before the photo was taken. It just doesn't make sense to me. It was the same sinking feeling in my gut. It's entirely irrational to fill in the gaps of my knowledge with random conclusions. It looks like I'm the only person who's even aware of this game, and exploring the rest of the DS, aside from the camera roll, of course, yielded no useful information. It's becoming increasingly difficult not to think about Mr. O. It had been the only occupied home in the town that couldn't have been a coincidence. It was a feeling which grew in intensity the longer I stayed inside of Mr. O's basement. It was the exact same feeling that overcame me whenever I thought of telling my mother about Mr. O's presence in the game. It's as if the game is trying to tell me that I'm alone in this world, alone aside from being with him. It wants me to accept it. It wants me to think that this is normal. It's as if the game is training me, or for lack of a better term. It's controlling how I think. It's controlling how I feel. It's controlling how I behave. It's making me act the way he wants me to act. It's been thrown back into the cardboard box where it belongs, and where it will stay. It couldn't have been a coincidence that the one person who reached out to me about Township Village just so happened to have a name reminiscent of my childhood friend, right? It contained a message from the address I had been emailing. It wasn't that I didn't wish to make up for lost time, it's just that there were more pressing matters to be discussed. It must have been terribly difficult for him to have lost his mother, and to have learned what he did about his father. It was only when I told her that I had met up with Sam that she quit her act. So I asked her. It wasn't long after Mr. O's arrest that the authorities showed up on our doorstep. It was just another cruel way of warping me into his pathetic plaything. Finn.
Thank you for that secondary synopsis of the story. Though slightly distant, like I was able to follow along because I've read the story, but like I could see some parts being a little confusing. Now the take from gamer to take gamer's job right now. The reason why Mikey does this is because there's always better words to use at the beginning of a sentence other than like its, ands, or buts and so's and such like that. I'm going to retort though on this one because this is a blog. This is done up like a blog, and this is how like it's sort of blogs are generally like people's like gathered thoughts and such. So it's the way the character constructs a sentence. No, it's the way the character like it's sort of in that range though of like it's the way the character like thinks and talks, because this is sort of a like I'm sure they did some editing or like people do some editing when they do blogs, but generally it's just a sort of a brain burst. Like it's just whatever they have in their mind, and some of that just they have to get it down on paper or digital format.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be a little bit more lenient regarding the it story in this one because it actually adds a little bit of immersion level because it feels like a blog entry or like a series of blog entries with the its, ands, or buts. That said, you shouldn't always do that. But yeah,
like in regards to quote unquote proper writing practices, no, you shouldn't do it. But as Cultus said, basically there are exceptions to the rule.
And this actually kind of adds a little bit extra like immersion level, I think. The grammar errors actually add a little bit of extra
they do sometimes.
Immersion. Yeah. Well, there is even like early, actually, a good example of that is like in the story itself, like when he's reading some of the messages that his like 10-year-old self or his childhood self jotted down. I don't think we actually get a specific age when he was a kid when this happened.
For some reason, I was thinking 10 as well.
Yeah,
It may
same.
have-
I was thinking like 8 or 10, honestly.
I wonder if it's actually said because we both thought the exact same age. Doesn't matter.
Maybe. I mean, yeah. But yeah, like there is a like in his when he reads some of the journal entries from his like childhood self, like they are clearly misspelled and some of that, and like all the capital I's, like all the like the
Guys are
singular
not
like I's.
capitalized.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, it's very. Again, it adds a little bit of immersion level, but like regular practice, don't do this. don't do its, ends, or buts at the beginning of a sentence. But I guess if that's
As you
all
start
that
a
Mikey
sentence
has,
with a butt.
Yep, that's
yeah.
all
Well, I
Mikey
mean,
has.
that's dialogue.
I know.
So that's all Mikey has. Okay.
Yep.
All right, gamer.
Okay. Let me scroll up to it. There we go. So my first one. This happens twice, and I'm going to go back on it through this, but I'm going to say it anyways. Another showed me grinning. This is in regards to pictures. Another showed me grinning with glee as I swung on a tire bound to a tree by a rope. Period. Right. The tire swing was on the playground at my former elementary school. So when I was first reading this, I did a quick scroll down through the entire page, seeing all the words and going, "Oh God!" And then, but also the main reason is because I was seeing if there's any timestamps because I didn't see any, so I'm assuming at that point it's just a normal story. That Jeremy has survived and he's recounting it after the fact.
Yep.
But so in that headspace, I felt like that sort of writing is a little off in regards to saying right, as in he just wrote something down and then he's recalling something else that he's adding in after the fact. That would work in dialogue a lot better, but in a written format, it's not as appropriate, I feel, especially since like there's a backspace button, and considering
Yeah,
he
you
was
could either do
just
that or
talking about the tire, it could just continue saying that the tire is from elementary school.
Yeah.
That being said, it is a pretty informal writing style that he's going with. So
that's
whatevs.
Yeah, that's what I was going to retort with, but I was like, you already have that syndrome, so cool.
Yeah, and then as I continued reading, it went to the first part saying, like, tune in later for continuation of this journal or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess it is a journal format after all, but still.
It would be nice if that was, like, right at the get-go, like, again, entry 1 is at the top, like, where it said, like, it gave us, like, timestamp for the entries, so we knew that this was a blog entry of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actual dates aren't that important. Just the fact that it's a day by day or week by week entry or whatever would make it better.
Yeah, like you don't need like the year, but like even like just like some days, because it seemed like I was able to follow along through the story that it was like basically every day he was posting, and then like there's a couple of times during a day he would post. So, so you really just need like the date, like a day and maybe like a timestamp.
Yep.
But that's about it.
And we'll move on to the next one. Grabbing the power cord and plugged it into the wall, I connected it to my DS and pressed the power button. So, first off, I wasn't aware that this guy was a guitarist or that the Nintendo DS was a stringed instrument, that he can play a power chord on it. Because it's spelled with C-H-O-R-D.
Oh, God. I didn't catch that. I was like, what? What are you getting at? Yeah. Oh, okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it should just be C-O-R-D.
Yeah.
And then he gets into the game and he goes up to the dresser and opens it up. And it says, an apple, a magnet, 50 gold, and a journal, all lied within the drawer. So they all talked and constantly spouted lies, apparently.
Yeah.
Or it's a misspelling. It's supposed to be laid.
Yeah. Surprised I didn't catch those ones so far.
I'd expected to find the incoherent ramblings of a kid in those journals. Instead, I was greeted with rather ominous notes left about in the desolate world. Well, an almost desolate world. So, based on how this game is being presented to me, a quote-unquote journal is basically a sticky note. It's a singular note that you can make and save in the game. So, all this plural stuff that's going on shouldn't be happening. Because this is after he just found a note. So
yeah,
and he read all that was in the one note. So unless it's a journal that has multiple pages and he's only reading the first one and telling us about the first one, then it should just be singular. It corrected for it to be singular, it'd just be, I'd expected to find another incoherent rambling of a kid in this journal too. Instead, I was greeted with an ominous note left about in a desolate world, blah, 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 blah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because they are just little snippets.
Yeah, it's like in like those kind of like games, like I want to say pixelated, but like if it's from the DS era, it's like kind of just like maybe just low poly or like
Yeah, it's 3D. It's Animal Crossing.
Yeah, it's Animal Crossing, so it's like slightly 3D, or it's like better, like slightly better 3D. But like like they usually have like, again, journal entries and stuff like that, or like little like areas or little like things that you can read and such. But yeah.
But either way, it's presented to be a singular page. Each journal, quote unquote, is an 8.5 by 11.
Yeah.
That you can only write so much on. Based on the length of them, probably not even that. They're more like sticky notes, like I suggested. Either way, moving on. So the end of the first entry happens and just sort of stops. I'm kind of surprised that there's no note of like, has this happened to anyone else? Let me know. Like, he's posting this online for reasons unknown to us. Like, it would give that would at least give a reason aside from just assuming.
Yeah, I thought he did like do something like that.
Later on, he's like responds to comments and stuff, but the first one, it just kind of stops. Until then, take care is the last thing it says. Right, that kid in the photograph, I'll have to ask her about him too. I'll be sure to write you all again after I chat with her about it. Until then, you guys take care. Yeah,
I think it's maybe I'm thinking of later when he's like actually asking like, if anybody has any information about this game, please let me know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And then we get on to the long line of Google Hangout messages. And
yeah,
I don't know about you guys, I had a hard time following them both the times that it showed up. Yeah, because like I know that it's all like Jeremy talks and then Sam and then Jeremy and then Sam.
Yeah, it's back and forth.
It's so easy to get lost to who's talking.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Because it's just one short thing and then another short thing and another short thing, and it just keeps going. And if I have to go back to think about something and then scroll back down, like, shit, who was talking on this line? Then I have to go back and reread the whole thing to get back to where I was and then continue.
I get you. Yeah, it would be a little bit like maybe a little bit clarity. Like, again, just have like
even just like a
Sammy and Jeremy's like
and a S and a colon if you want to keep it simple.
Yeah, like at Jeremy or at Sammy, like colon. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
that would fix that would clear it up for some of us. Yeah.
Yeah. So he meets up with Sammy. They're sitting down in the Starbucks, and basically says that he knows the creator of the game. Well, the quote is, "He looked at me with great remorse, softly, and muttered that he knew these things because he knew the creator of the game on a personal level." And then it tabs down, "The user has not expressed certainty in adding future updates." So for me, when I read that, I found it was kind of a weird way to end that entry. Because like it's so sudden. I was expecting to start hearing about why right now.
Yeah.
But now, it just stops, and there's no explanation as why it stops until the next entry.
Yeah. Sort of kind of giving us a little bit of a cliffhanger.
Well, yeah, but
okay,
if you're trying
out
to
of
do
game,
this if you're trying to do this and set it up like a standard story, like it doesn't matter. You can do cliffhangers and stuff. But if you're trying to keep this on like a personal and immersive level, you wouldn't end it like that. You would end it with like he says that, and then have Jeremy go like, "What he told me, I don't feel comfortable repeating right now. I don't know if I ever will," and then end it. So we know why it's not continuing.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that would work. Yeah.
Because it just stops.
Because like it makes sense why he stops. Like at that point, like without because out of story, like it makes sense why he'd stop, because we find out later he had to spend a week or like a couple of days like to like kind of collect himself, because he wasn't prepared to like remember that and like jot that stuff down, because it would affect him mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, but he's writing down this blog to tell people about what's going on. So why wouldn't he tell people about what's going on?
Yeah, you should. Yeah. Maybe have like a line where it's just like I don't feel like, so it doesn't just stop where it's just like I don't feel comfortable repeating right now. Yeah, like you said.
Yep. But yeah, that's the end of my grammar, actually.
Okay. So now we'll move on to actual thoughts. So the first one here I have, I actually want to address the. So the story does deal with a pretty touchy subject, like child molestation, in the characters' like background stuff. But I do like that on the entry in creepypasta.wiki we do get like a sort of a content warning, because even though the story, like I'll bring it up more in like my actual thoughts, like the story does kind of tastefully address those subjects like as much as you can. But yeah, it's good that the story did actually leave a like a not safe for work content warning regarding the material that you're about to read.
I both disagree and agree at the same time.
Okay.
Just to make it nice and complicated for you. Because
thank you.
Do you have more to say on that?
No, like just I just think because like a creepypasta.wiki, like it's like I'm reading the content warning thing right now. And it's like, yeah, it even has like, if you're a parent and want to know more about the suitability of our content for your child, please read the information below. It's like, yeah, the creepypasta.wiki doesn't have an age lock, so it's like anybody can read these stories. So like sometimes you don't want your like somebody reading this, or like if you have a trigger to this kind of content, you may want to know about that ahead of time.
Exactly, and that's why I partially disagree with this. Because yes, it's a not safe for work warning, but it's not a proper trigger warning. Because you could read through the entire story and get to all the molestation stuff before you know that's what it's about. And then all of a sudden you're triggered and you were not warned at all.
Yeah, it really should. Okay, yeah, so it should be more specific.
It should be like,
as to like,
yeah, not for safe for work, and also put in the triggers as to why. So you know right off the bat.
Yeah, like this story deals with subjects of child molestation and such. So
that being said, that is a spoiler, I guess.
It yes, but also like it's a fickle thing to kind of address, because again, horror is supposed to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to read that kind of, if you're not going to get it, if you are not going to enjoy it because of that, because you have because you've suffered through that, and you have a trigger of that, like that's sort of a dick move. But at the same time, like, yeah, it's a fickle thing.
Yeah.
Much like your answer earlier is like, yes, I agree, but also don't agree. It's complicated.
You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Exactly, yeah. Like, and you know what? Sometimes it's better to, you know what? Maybe this is one time where, like, you know what? Maybe you should have a spoiler, that kind of spoiler thing, where it's like this story deals with some with child trauma. Maybe even use that.
Yeah, because that's vague like that.
Yeah. So if you don't like talking about, or if you don't like to deal with things that have to do with children, maybe don't read the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I just honestly, that wasn't even in my notes. I just wanted to bring that up because when I checked the entry, I realized that there was a content warning, and that was I'm going to talk about the content of the story later in my actual thoughts, so I thought I'd bring that up.
Yep.
But onto my first actual thought that I wrote down. So finally, as I neared the end of the camera roll, I stumbled upon a photo of another child. So earlier it states that this is a digital camera, and I actually had to go back up and like see, like, was it a digital camera? Because it says camera roll. So I was thinking like celluloid roll. Like I was thinking analog for some reason, and then it's like no, it's like near the bottom sat a black digital camera. So I was like, do you call? So I was like, do we call camera roll? Do we call it a camera roll when you're like browsing through the digital files, like on your camera? Like, is that just like a carryover term from our analog days?
I tried looking it up, and the answer is no.
Is it then like as albums, or?
Yeah, it's more albums. But in on iPhone, in the photo app, supposedly there is something called a camera roll.
Yeah, I thought I recognized that.
But that's only on iPhone. So
yeah, like
Everywhere else, it's albums. The
Yeah,
photo
right.
album stuff.
Well,
Yeah,
specifically,
I haven't-
yes, but this character can call it whatever he wants. It is
True. Yeah,
also a camera roll. Like,
No, you're right. And I'm looking at my phone right now because I have an iPhone. And yeah, my albums is what the whole thing is called. But then when you go into like all the albums, like the main one that where like all of your photos are, not like categorized and stuff like that, it says camera roll. So, and again, it's probably just a carryover word from when we all used analog cameras. So.
sure. I didn't think that's where you were going to go with this quote, by the way.
Oh, do you have something else for this quote?
Yeah, I thought you were going to bring up the fact that this is a digital camera from his childhood, and it still has battery life on it.
Yeah.
It's been sitting in a
Yeah.
box
Right,
in the
yeah.
attic for like 10 or 20 years, and it works just fine.
Yeah, that like best case scenario, those photos are those batteries are dead. Worst case scenario, those batteries are leaking.
Yep.
Or leaking the chemical material out of it.
Unless the wording of it, because I quoted a slightly different part. My quote is, near the bottom sat a black digital camera. Lifting it up, I inspected its surface. It, just like everything else in the box, hadn't been touched in years. My curiosity had been sparked, and I looked through the images it held. So, unless that's saying that along with the camera were a bunch of pictures that we got printed out from it, and like the camera did previously hold those images, unless that's what it means, like he didn't turn it on.
It's probably more in line like that. He was browsing through the camera, but like those batteries would not be alive.
Yes, and I clarified that a few lines later, because a few lines down it said there must have been dozens of photos of me in that little device.
Yeah,
which kind of sounds like currently there are dozens of photos in it right now.
Yeah, and that section also annoyed me. Why didn't he plug it in? And then later he gets his DS and he plugs that in. It's like, come on, they're both technology.
Yeah, but this is a nuclear powered digital camera. It works infinitely forever.
Or it's not that important.
It's vital.
Very vital.
Vital for every story to be as thorough as possible with details.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes that's true, sometimes that's not. But that's just a personal opinion.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about the camera that we need to talk about, or can I move on?
Not that I can tell.
Cool.
Not that I remember.
It should be good to move on.
Okay. I'm going to start with this quote here. Finally, I was presented with the game on the home screen. The title read Township Village. My note here is like kind of like in the now, or in that moment.
Mine
it's like,
too.
I don't recognize this game. Is this an original game for this creepypasta? And then later, despite my drowsiness, I was able to Google Township Village for the DS. For the Nintendo DS. I found nothing. Not a single seller of the game on eBay or Amazon. Not even an obscure forum post about the game on Reddit or Quora. Either way, either this was a highly unknown game or it was a completely original copy altogether. Now that I think about it, I don't remember how I got my hands on this game in the first place. And I was like, thank you for clarifying that.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, original IPs. Now, later in the story, we discovered that it was a modded version of Animal Crossing for the DS. But still, at this stage, at this stage in the game, it has changed into a different game, than Animal Crossing.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it counts as something creatively distinct. It's, if nothing else, it's paying homage to mechanics and themes from the game it pulled from. So,
yeah,
huzzah, satirization.
When I first read the game title and couldn't find it, I'm like, oh, it's not a real game. Immersion's dead. And then chapter 2, it gets explained. I'm like, okay, well, good. That explains why I can't find info on it. Regained immersion points.
Yeah. See, I went with creativity. You're like, fuck, immersion broken. Table
You
flip.
should know me by now. Immersion is
I really should.
tier importance for me.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, but my immersion broke when he didn't plug in the digital camera. So
yeah, it was a losing battle as soon as I got there.
Yeah. There's tech in this creepypasta? Oh, shit.
I was a little worried as I was reading this story. It's like, oh fuck, we're gonna get an earful from Mikey. But I'll move on to my next thing here. As I made my way down the halls, I didn't hear any second pair of footsteps. I didn't hear anything at all. No birds, no music, just the sound of my character marching down the marble floor. Okay, so for me, visualizing this as I was reading it, that would make for a great foreboding effect in one of these games, like in like a game regularly. Like, I think I've even seen this done in some games, like in some pixelated games and like some like regular DS games and stuff, where like the music just drifts away and all the sounds drift away until it's just your character's footsteps as you're walking, and it helps create it helps to ramp up and create an isolating atmosphere.
Yeah, I think
as you kind of go into a.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just as you like kind of are approaching a foreboding area in the game.
Yeah, I seem to recall that happening in Undertale or Deltarune or something like that. Might be wrong.
Okay, I've never played those games, but yeah, okay.
I haven't played them either, but I watched.
I'm thinking. Oh, fair enough. Yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember what game I've seen it in, but I feel like I have seen that. And if that's not a thing in games, it should be more often. Because it's a good that's almost like a good spot to have where where you know that a boss is about to happen, because all the birds stop chirping, all the insects start all the music starts fading out and going dead, and then it's just your character walking down this hallway toward a larger chamber.
Yep. Where
you're about to face the boss. That would be a good kind of build up to what's about to happen.
Mm-hmm. For the listeners at home, I believe what I'm remembering is from Undertale, when you first run into what's her freaking name, Undyne in the long grass. If you know what I'm talking about. Cool. Moving on.
All right. I think what I'm thinking of also is the game Aversion, where the game starts off rather Kirby-like in terms of the music. It's all happy music and you're fighting little monsters and stuff like that. And it's all fun and stuff like that. But as the level progresses, the world starts peeling away and the music starts dimming and getting more sinister, and then eventually the music just goes away completely, and it's just your character walking into this desolate reality.
For sure.
I'm going to start with this. My next quote here is, if any of you reading this have any information of this game, please let me know. I'm trying not to lose that much sleep over all of this, so it would bring me great comfort to know that others know anything about it, or to know that others know about this. So yeah, like we said, or like I think you brought up earlier, Gamer. I think this is what I thought of.
Yeah.
When from earlier, when he was like, if anybody has any information about this game,
if that was the end of the first entry, that'd be fine.
That would be fine. Yeah.
Was the game even talked about in the first entry? I can't remember.
The game was he played a little bit of the first entry, I think.
Okay.
I think. So the reason I brought this quote though was and so creepypasta protagonist obsession strikes again.
Yeah.
It's really I think I've got a name now for this kind of thing. It's called investigation sickness. Or research sickness from red markets, where people who study the blight just go insane because it constantly changes.
Nice.
You can never pin down the origin or what the hell it is. It's just this. It's supposed to be an enigma. But I digress. I'll move on to the next thing, which is also a video game related thing. Well, now that I look at it. He turned towards the camera, facing me directly. He tilted his head and grinned. He was trying to directly communicate his glee. Not to my character, but to me, the player. This continued for a couple of seconds before he faced my character once more. And as I read this part, I was like, oh god, that would be incredibly creepy sensation. Because I know that feeling because I've had that happen in Assassin's Creed.
Really?
In one of the Assassin's Creed games, I believe it's I believe it's Brotherhood or Assassin's Creed 2, where one of the and this is spoilers. One of the ancient aliens, Minerva, looks past the historical character and is instead looking and talking to Desmond in the modern setting, / also you as a player.
Yeah.
So like it kind of like she looks like over his shoulder, and like Ezio actually like turns around like, what are you looking at? and then yeah, she starts talking, and the camera starts zooming into her face, so it's like she's right there. She's right there, Ray. She's looking at me. And it's exactly that kind of creepy like moment. It's like, what's going on? It's like, it feels like I'm a deer in the headlights kind of moment. Also, I have to give this the story some credit. I was getting a bit of duality while reading the story at this point. Like, there is the mystery going on of who is Mr. O and what exactly happened in the past of Jeremy, like what exactly is going on, which is creepy and honestly reminding me, like it was reminding me hard of vibes from other creepypastas we've done on the show, such as 1999, with the blog series, the investigation into a piece of media that has a skeevier, darker connotations to it. But then there's also this other mystery going on of like, where did this video game come from? It's like a traditional Vigipasta that we've read on the show, like again, like the Pokepastas and stuff like that at the start of the story, where like, oh, they find this haunted game and then like they pick it up and start playing through it, and they get like kind of an ennui or like a melancholy and like creepiness from like, because like they abandoned their game and stuff like that. But then it like pulls the curtain back to reveal that there's a much creepier situation going on and unfolding behind this game. That's not just like this character is going to recall some sad times and be affected by it.
Yeah.
Like, no, they're gonna remember some sad times, and they're gonna fucking feel it because it was bad. like it sort of like takes the idea of a video game creepypasta as the story goes and ramps up. It does what we always want these video game creepypastas to do. It ramps up the weird, like the sort of like the melancholy and the bitterness of what's going on in the plot, like to 11, to make it so it's not just like, oh well, like there's no connection because like nothing in this game can affect the player. It's like, no, this game can affect our player. And we're gonna do it on a psychological level. So this is, I guess, this in a way, this is how you should do a like if you're trying to do a psychological horror style like theme with a video game creepypasta, like so many of them try to do. This one sort of like just ramps up the levels of intensity. So
yeah, there's like proper escalation in it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's again like, yeah, the game, everything that's happening is in the game. However, the problem, the what this game is for our protagonist is it's sort of it's a trigger in itself. Like it's a trigger setup, because it's unlocking a bunch of like repressed memories that he had from his childhood. So, and revealing the actual, like, you thought this was a horror game a horror story about a cursed video game. No. The video game is just kind of the set dressing and the startup, like the warm up. The actual horror of this game, of this story, is much deeper and darker than you thought. So, again, I give it props for that kind of thing. Like, kind of, I went into this story when I was starting to read. I was like, it kind of felt like, oh god, are we just going to get another like video game creepypasta? Like with the tropes that we've kind of come to know and not particularly like.
But it is a video game creepypasta. What you didn't want it to be was a Let's Play creepypasta.
Exactly, yeah. Like to be what all the other ones end up doing, where it's just about the game and like nothing hurts the character. Well, no, this one's going to hurt the character on a emotional and psychological level, and way better than any other story I think I've seen do with a video game element. So, but I'll move on to my next comment. So yeah, it goes on with. So this is like Sammy talking to him and explaining some things. When he found out about that, he went out to the store, told me he was going out to get a game. He came back with a copy of Animal Crossing. He came back with a copy of an animal game. He came back with a copy of an Animal Crossing game cartridge. Say that a couple of times fast, I dare you. And he went down to the basement with both the game and your DS. So actually, I looked it up because I was like curious, and like Animal Crossing on the DS came out in 2005, so that would place his childhood around 2005, like the early 2000s. Which it does say earlier on, like his childhood was in the early 2000s because he had DS and such. But yeah, it sort of gives us a loose timeline of like how old he is now versus like how young he was back then. But yeah, I just had to bring that up because I'm me.
Yep. You know that he's not a fucking boomer like us.
Yeah. Hey man, I had DS in my teens.
I know.
Actually, I have several DSs.
I mean, like, digital cameras weren't a thing when we were children.
That's true, yeah. I remember a lot of my summers having, like, disposable cameras.
Yeah.
To take pictures of, like, me and my cousins exploding cars. Like, toy cars.
I'm glad you ended that with toy cars, not just me and my cousins exploding.
Yeah.
Like, you've just been reincarnated multiple times since then.
I mean...
That's not a lie.
Cultist insurance is a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
Anyway. So at this point, my notes from this point on, for a good portion are going to form their own narrative of my journey into theory crafting as I was reading the story, just
Okay.
as a warning.
My notes kind of did that too, honestly.
Yeah, I had to I had to actually like shuffle a few things around to like kind of so that they were all like in order, so I could collect my. I wasn't going to just like after we get to the end and like a part of me was like maybe I should just remove some of these notes because like they've been cleared up. It's like no, I want to actually flesh out this journey I went through while reading the story. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start with this quote here. When the screen regained its color and I was reintroduced to my surroundings, Mr. O was gone, and the bathroom door was left wide open. All that remained was a bag sitting on the bathroom sink. Opening it, I found a note inside, accompanied by a cookie. Thank you, Jeremy. Remember, Mr. O loves you. So, it was at this point that I had the horrifying idea that this Mr. O may have been a teacher Jeremy had who molested him.
Yeah, I went with principal.
And
yeah,
I went with because it was at the school and like in the class bathroom and like the door was locked and then he had to go over to him and then the lights went out. I was like, oh god, like it would. So yeah, and this game for whatever reason at the time, like because again I didn't know what the origin of the game was part of how he dealt with it back and then. Like I was kind of thinking that maybe the game was like it was a game that Jeremy had. Maybe it was and it was something him putting the character in there, like customizing the character and like jotting down notes was sort of like his way of like
coping,
putting the memories somewhere else,
so just
and like disassociating from them,
or just with coping, like a coping mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. It was like sort of like a coping mechanism. Now. Yeah, and it would explain why his mother, like the whole like molestation thing, would have explained why his mother was reticent when Mr. O came up again. But who is this Sam, and why does that name keep popping up in creepypastas involving missing people? Like Baraska and fake ID one we did like a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, are they Sams as well?
Yeah, I remember like the Sam was the friend that got killed by the doppelganger.
It's a very killable name, I guess. Sorry to all the
Wait
Sams
a minute.
out there.
Yeah. Wait, was that character also named? Was the main character in that one also named Jeremy?
I don't know, dude. As soon as I finish a story, I purge that from my memory banks. I mean, I'm not a robot. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. So on to my next quote here. After kind of getting that bit of like theory put in as like that this is actually a story about molestation and suppressing those memories. We get on to the next one here. It was as if the mere thought of doing so cultivated a strong reaction deep inside my gut. The best way I can describe it is the sensation that washes over us when we do something we aren't supposed to do as kids, such as sticking our finger in the cookie jar. Almost like someone, or almost like some deeper personal shame, perhaps brought on by trauma, creepy childhood trauma theory rising. And then my next quote here. I apologize, but you see, I dreamt of him last night. Mr. O appeared before me, his formidable stature casting a dark shadow over my petite frame. I looked up at him, arching my neck to view his face. His grin was as wide as could be as he stared down at me. His eyes seemingly bulged out of their sockets, the veins surrounding them protruding through his skin. He methodically set one foot in front of the other, approaching me. Okay, so I had a new theory at this point, which emerged. The description of Mr. O here with the bulging eyes specifically and like kind of looming over the character and like the character like looking down or looking up at this figure's face. And the bulging eyes sort of kind of what really kind of pulled it for me. And the new information that we received that that his dad, Jeremy's dad, had taken his own life. I feel like this could be that like what Mr. O represents. Perhaps Jeremy was the one to find his dad who had hanged himself. It might explain the facial features of Mr. O in this dream specifically, like and Jeremy as a coping mechanism customized this character or created an imaginary friend named Mr. O as a result of like seeing his dad like hanging and like looking down at him with bulging eyes almost as if like, you know, what happens when you are hanged and like you start getting oxygen deprivation.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that happens with your eyes. So yeah, that was how my theory was starting to kind of like a new theory had postulated was that like this was actually a coping mechanism for Jeremy seeing his dad commit suicide. Then we get on to the next one.
Also, we never get Jeremy's last name, so his last name could start with an O for all we know as well.
Actually, that theory does kind of get bunked.
Cool.
Because his last name is Jeremy L.
Does it say that?
Or it's I think actually when he now that I think about it, like when he was in one of the classrooms, it said Jeremy L.
Okay. Well, so, like that single classroom where it was only his desk?
I believe that's the one, yeah.
Okay.
So it does kind of poke a hole in theory that way. But again, this is sort of my journey as I was going through. So like, yeah. So the next thing here, there were a few photos that sparked my interest more than the rest. There were photos of me. I didn't recognize the background of the image. The walls behind me were blank coated with white paint. I wasn't smiling in any of these photos. I stood against the wall I was looking upward. The camera had been angled downward to take my picture. The position the photographer assumed was several feet above my head, meaning no child could have taken those images. Okay, so did anyone else have like the pleasant musical score in their head while reading him reminiscing about like, you know, through the DS photos, and then it suddenly like then as this paragraph starts to play out, the creepy violin strings kind of take their place? No? Anyone else?
No.
Does anybody else not get like have like music play in their head while they read?
No.
Okay, fair. I have a very
more of a bard than I am, sir.
That is true. Also, I think it's well known that like I have a very vivid imagination. So like when I read, I visualize everything and like it's constantly in flux.
Yes, and you're also more of a movie buff than I am.
That's true. Yeah. Because as soon as like he's reading through the stories like like all like nice music kind of playing as he's like reminiscing on like the childhood stuff, and then we get to these photos and like it starts playing out, and then suddenly the creepy like violin strings just sound like drop as like you realize, oh no, something horrible happened in these photos.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. So I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah. And then it was at this point that, like, yeah, scratch my previous theory about his dead dad, like, thing. This is definitely entering skeevy bad touch territory.
Mhm.
But then we move on. I just stared at the screen. Mr. O returned my gaze. His smile had vanished at that point. His typical jovial expression had been replaced with a stern look. And it's okay to keep secrets to protect the ones you love, isn't it, Jeremy? You can keep everything between us, right? And that line and, like, everything that was going on, I was like, oh no, I think my two previous theories have converged. No fucking bueno. Is this why his dad killed himself? Like, at this point, I was kind of thinking that his dad was Mr. O and had molested his son, and that's why he commits suicide. So the plot thickened, and I didn't like it how it was thickening. And then we get to this line here. I know this all sounds insane, but it's honestly how I feel. It's as if the game is training me, for lack of a better term, or grooming you. Bleh. Congrats, Icydice. I am officially uncomfortable with this story.
You did it.
Yeah. Oh god. Yeah. I was definitely like anytime grooming comes up in game or in stories and stuff, I was like, just no good. Like, congrats. Like, you've achieved the horror element. I am disturbed. I say that, like, as much as a good thing as it is a bad thing. Like, again, like real life, that's super not great, totally not good at all. In fiction, and like when you're telling a story about those kind of things, like, you want to invoke that, like, disgust. Yeah. So you did a good job in that regard. Okay, back to my regular notes. So that was basically where I had gotten to, where it was like the journey of, like, oh, this is about molestation. Oh, maybe this is about his dad committing suicide. Oh, maybe they're both. Maybe his dad commits suicide because he molested his son. and then we got this part about the grooming aspect. So it's like, and then we get this part here. Sam told me that Mr. O was his dad, or was his father. All of my prior theories had been wrong. And then my comment to that was, as was half of mine.
Yeah.
Because we still can't discount molestation.
Yes.
And that is recorded.
That'd be a great soundbite.
Me saying that. Yeah, great. Thanks. Please don't do that. Please. I'll move on. Part of me so this is like, now that my theory crafting is over, like, I move on to, like, the rest of my notes, which are near the tail end of the story. Part of me wishes that I had stayed ignorant of his existence. Maybe things would be better had I never explored the attic and retrieved that DS from inside of the box to begin with. Not to downplay the seriousness of the subject matter here, but I like how this story has a bit of a cosmic horror element that it uses, or that it kind of applies using a very human horror. By that I mean the whole element of cosmic horror of, like, things man weren't meant to know, and, like, ignorance is our saving grace. Like, that sort of theme. Like, he's received this terrible revelation from his past that he had suppressed because it was so horrifying and horrible to him. But now that he's dredged that back up, the genie cannot be put back in the bottle. Mm-hmm. And it's often, like, that is often a thing that pops up in cosmic horror and, like, in Lovecraft stories. Like, The Shadow Out of Time, the character blacks out, wakes up like 60 or like 12 years later in an insane asylum, and when he tries to dredge up his memories of what happened in the last 12 years, he finds the horrible truths that some alien creature had, like, abducted his mind and replaced him and, like, had him do a bunch of stuff in the past. Like, not to pull away from the seriousness of the subject matter here, like, this is more taking that kind of idea of, like, I wish I hadn't looked into this stuff, and kind of, like, using a much more familial, a much more grounded, skeevy real world horror to illustrate that kind of element. And I think it shows that like that kind of thing isn't just isolated to cosmic horror. It's also found in human horror because humans are the worst.
He is.
And then onto my next thing here. I tossed it into the garbage can where it belongs. There's no way, there was no time to let that piece of junk cost me any more sleep. And to that, I was just like, oh, I would have smashed that thing with a hammer and then burned it.
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't at least break it.
Yeah, like, fuck that cartridge.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I would definitely have, like, destroyed it. I would not have simply thrown it in the trash. Because, like, that kind of has the Jumanji situation where, like, you're just passing the... You're just, like... It's a 1 in, like, a million chance that somebody will find that at the trash yard. But, like, yeah, for me, I would want a finality of just destroying it, not just simply throwing it away.
Granted, it was a personalized horror experience for him, so unless the person finds it is named Jeremy, who is also currently being molested by a Mr. O, then it
I mean, you're right, but you're correct in that. But like at the same time, again, I personally would like, yeah, no, that thing needs to be destroyed, not just thrown away.
Oh yeah, sure, you destroy it regardless.
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then my next thing here is actually the end of the story, where we get this the dialogue, like the Google chat or Google Hangout thing. The what?
Second Google Hangout one?
Yeah. At the very end of the story where it's like, hey Sam, let's meet over coffee soon. I'm kind of bummed I didn't get anything to drink last time. What do you say? Dude, seriously? You're going to make me drive all the way over there again? Nah, man. I'll meet you halfway. Fine. It sounds like a plan. But you're covering the bill since I tried paying for your drinks the last time. Yeah, all right, dude. Whatever you say. Smiley face. I'm just like, wow. I'm really glad how this story concluded. It's not a happy ending in quotes. Like it's not like a full happy ending. It's one where there's a glimmer of hope. That things can that things can be accepted and moved on. And I think that sometimes, especially in horror stories, that whole situation with this sort of topic, you need that. Like there needs to be some kind of like there needs to be that aspect of, or it almost kind of makes it a little bit more realistic because like sometimes the character, like sometimes you need to have like that moment where it's like, yeah, things aren't going to be things can never be back the way they were like before you didn't recall any of this. But there's that glimmer of hope that like, you know what, this shitty thing happened. The healing process can now begin.
Yeah, it almost has like a moral of the story in a way. Like no matter how, like if shit goes bad, that doesn't mean it has to stay bad forever. You can still heal and move on from it.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's like I honestly really liked how the story like played out. Like from because we had like this really dark, creepy horror story, and we didn't get like a gushy like, oh, everything's gonna be all right. It's like, no, things are gonna move on, and the healing process can begin. And like the sort of like the glimmer of hope here is that like these two friends were reunited and are able to kind of move, and they were able to carry on afterward. So
also, I slightly misread that ending a little bit because
okay.
He went like, fine, sounds like a plan, but you're covering the bill since I tried paying for your drinks last time. I missed the tried part. I thought he said he did pay for the drinks last time. So I was going to say, like, but he said he didn't get a drink last time. So did he or did he not? This is also vital.
Oh, God.
Well, he did pay for the drinks. His own drink.
No, but he didn't get a drink last time. Oh, he paid for his own. Him being Sam.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Also, I do have to say, the part here is like, nah, man, I'll meet you halfway. It's like that in itself is sort of a nuance to me because it's first off, it's like, yeah, that's something that you would do for a buddy. Like if they have to drive like a far away in order to meet you and stuff like that. Like you guys meet halfway, but it's also like a sort of a subtext sort of situation where it's like, they're meeting halfway to reconcile and to like build their relationship back up again, like their friendship back up again.
Yeah.
So like I think it's a really cool. Again, I really enjoyed like sort of the. I guess what I'm just trying to say is I really enjoyed how the story ended. Given like all the horror and creepiness that happened during the story.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes hard in a horror story because sometimes that like you do that and it comes off like kind of lame. But in this story, it even with a horror story, like sometimes you want that little glimmer of hope.
It had an oddly feel-good ending for a story about pedophiles.
Yeah. Well, but a pedophile and the victims dealing with the aftermath.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is definitely, I think honestly that's why it does well, is because it is about the aftermath of this trauma. And you want that, like as a reader, like you kind of want, sometimes you often want that kind of feel good, like even if it's a little bittersweet, like that feel good kind of conclusion to the scenario. But I digress. I'm done with my actual thoughts until we go into final thoughts. So, Mikey, the E stands for evil.
Let's see. We've already mentioned the camera. All right. So here's my first quote here. I must have spent quite some time reminiscing until I stumbled upon an odd photo. When I read this, I thought it was going to read, I must have spent quite some time reminiscing until I realized I had no idea who took these photos of me on my camera. Because
that would be that would be really creepy too.
On the camera that's at his DS or the digital one?
I think this is the digital one still.
It wasn't clearly said that was his digital camera.
Yeah, it could have been like his mom's, or it could have been Mr. O's.
Yeah.
I think later on, I sort of like wondered, like when we got to the DS photos and stuff, I kind of wondered, like, wait, who took the photos from the digital camera?
Yeah, because the digital camera photos came out fine, but the DS ones were all blurry and out of focus and crappy because it was a child doing them. Like it's straight up explains it like that. So I think his mother was taking
except for the ones. Yeah.
I think his mother was taking the photos with the digital one.
Yeah. And yeah, like the photos on the DS were all blurry except for the ones that were taken of him in that room.
Yes, because he didn't do them. Mr. O did.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that was a good and like speculations. Like, yeah, who did take these photos?
All right. To do my next note here, because we've already talked about how I plugged in the DS and not the digital camera.
Yep.
Yeah. Is though it is strange, I can't seem to recall him, nor can I remember writing these notes down in my game. I'll have to ask my mother about him when she gets home from work this evening. To which my note is, you'd be amazed at how much stuff from your childhood you forget as an adult. And you expect your mom to remember? Oh boy, someone's set for some disappointment.
Yeah.
I mean, you say that, but like, there's things that the niece cultist is doing right now that I am never forgetting, and I'm never gonna let her forget. Like all the creepy little creatures and stuff that she like concocts, and like, or all the little stories of like the stick witch that lived in her closet, and she doesn't like when it comes out at night and like walks around the ceiling. That was when she was like 2 or 3. I am never letting her forget that.
That's normal. That's fine.
Yeah. And yeah, there are things that like sometimes your parents don't remember and stuff, but sometimes there are things that your parents do remember a lot about from you. So,
yeah, I think people viewing things third person, like seeing it not through the eyes of the person who's experiencing it directly, they kind of remember it. You know, if you know what I'm saying. I'm saying it poorly, but
yeah, I get what you're saying. Like it's, I think I do partially agree with you, Mikey. like, yeah, good luck. Good luck asking your parents about this. Like, they're probably just gonna like talk about how like, oh, you just sat in front of the screen while it was static for you, or you just you just played your DS when it's static. You have this really vivid imagination about this game. But like, I think it's so. I think often like I think it's sort of like kind of a crapshoot. Because like some people's parents are more like observant, or like some things stick around with the adult, like the third person adult that was like watching you grow up than you remember.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, but I don't agree with you is what I'm trying to get
Well, thanks for taking my line.
Yeah.
It's my move.
I'm satirizing it. I'm paying homage. Yeah, sorry. Continue, Mikey. Homage.
And then my next actual thought is something that I read into it too much, so it goes in a completely different direction.
Excellent. Love that.
Yay. I did that too.
So, following in her footsteps, I made my way to my bedroom and lay down on the bed.
Oh no. Yeah, you know what? I'm only like groaning right now because I did the exact same thing. Like I double taked.
Yes.
It's like I'd be like I'm Max from Fury Road. It's like that's a trap. It's like that's bait. It's just like yeah, no, that was like I looked at that. I was like, no, that's not what they
Maybe
mean.
you should say my bed, not the bed.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait, does that mean that the gutter mind is infected Mikey?
The whole story is about this.
That's true.
That's why I didn't give you sass about it before, because that's the emotion you're supposed to be getting.
Yeah, fair.
All right. And my next actual thought is about the unblinking nature of Mr. O. Like that they try to make it seem as though it's creepy in the game because he doesn't blink, but if he wasn't programmed to blink, then it's not that creepy.
Yeah. Yeah, probably should have been described a little bit differently. Like maybe just like because I think you can capture that same kind of like creepiness of being stared at by having just like a character have like really wide eyes, like and like pinpoint like dots in their pupils.
Yeah, but still blink.
Like, yeah, or not even blink. Like just don't bother with like the whole like blink mention of the blinking, but like. Or of not blinking, but just have like these like really wide eyes staring at you, and like the pupils just move around the eye whenever you're walking around, like they follow you.
Also, it's less weird because the only two characters in that game are the player character and Mr. O. So even if the player character blinks, it's not super weird that Mr. O doesn't, because he isn't surrounded by all these other characters that blink normally.
Yeah, exactly. So he has no like context to it.
Right. And then at some point, because we didn't really get the Animal Crossing mention until later, I envisioned this as a version of Petscop.
Yeah. See, I kind of actually got Stardew Valley style kind of vibe. Like I went full pixelation for most of my visualization until we got to the Animal Crossing. I had to like keep reinserting. It's like, no, it's 3D environment.
So same thing. I agree with you, Cultist, because I also immediately went into Stardew Valley. However, on like the mentioning of the game, it says it resembles Animal Crossing from the get-go.
I know, it's just
also
maybe it's because I'm an old man gamer, so yeah. Like because I'm old man gamer, like I don't like when I think of like the DS, like for some reason when I think of a handheld, I think I skip past the DS and go straight to the GBA, like the Game Boy Advance. So, yeah, that's the game. Well, that was also. Well, that was my handheld as a kid.
Yeah.
Like growing up, like I didn't have a Game Boy or a Game Boy Color. I had a Game Boy Advanced. So again, it's more of on a personal level though. So But yeah.
Anyway, so continuing on, because I thought Petscop, when the story mentions the footsteps in the game, all I could hear was that wah, 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 wah type
Yeah.
noise
Mhm.
from
Very
the
video
Petscop
gamey noises.
videos.
Yeah. And for those of you
Uh,
who don't know what we're talking about with Petscop, check out our episode on Petscop.
Episode Petscop.
Episode 300 of El Dente Rigor Mortis.
Anyway, so my next thought process, or my next quote here, I really did spend an inordinate amount of time on this game. Not only had I built a town with several houses, but a replica of my old school too.
Future Cults is here, adding in a bit because Mikey's audio completely cut out for this part. What he was trying to get at with the town stuff was that he found it strange that a kid could have made this town on his own in this game. Like, it would take a lot of work. And then he starts going into the programming. So we'll send you back now.
The other note that I had sort of pertains to this is like the creating of the character, because he assumed that he created the Mr. O character.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, it would have to have a really simple integration, and basically you just set the personality type to stalker.
Yeah. I have a theory, but
Is it a game theory?
I mean, it involves games, so by definition,
Cool.
yes. So my theory here is that he only thinks that in his childhood that he made the town and made the school and stuff. My guess is that maybe should have been brought up as a speculation that his and it's sort of brought in subtext, because we find out that Mr. O, or Sam's dad, was a developer, was a software developer and engineer. My guess is that the town, the houses, and like the school, like they all have special levels to them. So my guess is that Jeremy only thinks, like, initially thinks that he customized this game as a kid because it matches stuff that him as a kid would have like known and stuff like that. But I think the reality here is that Mr. O made the world, like designed the school, or like set up the school, set up the houses and stuff like that.
It does say that the school was there. It's not 100% accurate because it was made by a child.
That's what he's speculating, or that's what he's assuming there. But I think more accurately, what probably happened was, again, like Mr. O made a rough version of a school.
Yeah.
Because again, there's a secret, like there's a locked door inside that school, and there's a bunch of like programmed like elements to that school that, like, again, like going into the classroom, having it locked, then going to the bathroom, having it locked.
Why would
Jeremy
like program traps?
Yeah, exactly. Why would he? Yeah, I think in this case, I think it's actually more logical to me that this is all built by Mr. O. And again, because the memories were suppressed and repressed, Jeremy's like knee-jerk reaction when he first comes across this stuff in the game, after, like, with the memory still repressed, he's thinking that like this is what he did as a kid with this customization.
Right. Then I'll finish the actual thought with another quote.
Okay.
Now, I don't know about you, but I can't imagine myself coding such complex interactions into this game as a small child. To which my response is, yes, I'm having trouble imagining this game exists. Thank you for asking.
Now, are you like you can't imagine somebody like taking an Animal Crossing game and modding it and stuff like that?
Well, a kid.
Oh yeah, for a kid, yeah, for sure. Like, again, this part is like, I think honestly, in this quote is like he doesn't think that he did it.
Yeah.
I think he's like at this point, it's still a mystery as to like where did this game come from and why is it why does it all have all this like customized stuff in it? Like, because I don't think I could have done this.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. And I'll skip ahead a bit just because I'm talking about this game and whatnot. So there's a quote that Cultist did earlier. He came back with a copy of Animal Crossing game cartridge, and he went down to the basement with both the game and your DS. To modify games and all that, especially on Nintendo hardware, isn't an easy thing to do.
It's not
Because
impossible, but
yeah, it's not impossible, but you have to have the knowledge to break the digital rights management, or DRM as it's called.
Yeah.
And it might even be easier to find a ROM and then basically make the changes to the ROM and then put it on a blank, as
Yeah.
opposed to trying to rewrite what's on the actual cartridge.
It says he's a software engineer, so yeah.
It does say that sort of hand wavy.
Yeah, unfortunately.
He did. but I do actually kind of agree with Mikey because I have a blank DS cartridge with a bunch of ROMs and emulators. So I know that is possible to do. And when it said that it was a blank cartridge, like there's no like writing or anything like that, it's like, why would he scratch off the sticker on the for the Animal Crossing game, or like why wouldn't it look like it was like scratched off or something like that, not just like completely clean?
Well, maybe both happened. Like he bought the Animal Crossing game as reference, and then also bought a blank one, downloaded a ROM, and did all that.
Yeah,
but he had a working game as reference as well.
Maybe that could be it. Because the ROM, I do feel like the ROM scenario is probably a little bit more likely because again, he's a software engineer, so he'd have the know-how of how to do it, how to tinker with it. But it does seem like that would be the easier scenario to achieve his goal, rather than go out and buy a game and break it. But yeah,
that was, I think, the end of my talks there for that thought. So I guess on to my next thought, unless you have more to say.
No. Gamer, do you have anything to say on that?
No. Cultist, do you have anything to say on that?
No. Mikey, do you have anything to say on that?
No. And on to Max Lab.
Continue on.
All right. So the dream sequence that should have ended sooner because dream.
We all know how much Mikey hates dreams.
So the first quote I have here. At that moment, I realized a strong sense of raw terror was brewing within me. I finally snapped out of my daze and began to struggle. And I rewrote that. I finally snapped out of my daze and woke up.
Yeah.
Because
unless he's suffering from sleep paralysis, in which case he is struggling in the dream, but also awake.
And why should it end so early?
He has a sense of raw terror that can wake you up, and he was snapped out of his daze. So
can or will 100% of the time?
Yeah, it can, but it doesn't always, because like I've had dreams that have gone like wrong and gone nightmare. And even though I'm terrified, like again, I'm struggling to get away from something.
Sure you are. You love it.
And I can't. Yes, I just embrace it now. No, I like again, where like I'm having a great dream and then I realize that something is in my house chasing me and I start running down the hallway to get to my room, and I can it's just the hallway goes on forever as I struggle to try and escape this slasher or whatever it is that's chasing me. I don't even sometimes know what it is that's chasing me. I just know that I'm being chased. Like I've definitely had those dreams where I'm like trying to get somewhere, but like I'm either going like in slow-mo or the hallway just keeps extending. And yeah, at that point I'm gripped with fear because oh shit, I'm being attacked. I'm being chased. Yeah, it can. Again, I'm agreeing with you, but I'm not agreeing with you. It's like it's a situation by situation basis.
It's like our freaking our motto of this episode.
Yeah.
So the next quote in the dream, where's another spot where you could wake up. As I squirmed and attempted to wriggle free of his grasp, he only clenched my arm tighter. I began grunting as panic set in. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I struggled to free myself from his grasp. All the while, he kept his eyes on me, his glare seemingly burning into my soul. So we've got panic, and he can feel the adrenaline coursing through him. So those are two things that will definitely wake you up.
Mikey's just like, must escape this nightmare.
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
And then the third one, which I have here, which is where I stopped because 3 is enough, right?
Yeah. In games, that's the perfect number.
Mhm.
You'll defeat the boss of this. That is this nightmare. this nightmare in the story. Sorry.
I only paused when I felt his palm violently strike my cheek. So yeah, that's also, of course, for waking up because sudden feeling of the palm against his cheek, so he feels it. So yeah, that would wake him.
Yes and no.
What a surprise!
Like, I know. Like, it's the palm of the monster in the nightmare. So it's if it had been him like slapping himself, that will wake you up sometimes. If like you pinch yourself, or if you like start hitting yourself to try and like snap yourself out of it, that will sometimes snap you out of a nightmare. But like if it's the monster itself, that's just a part of the nightmare. So it's not actually slapping you. So it's not actually causing it's just causing some fear and like some emotional pain, but it's not causing enough to like pull you out physically.
But like, you can't feel pain in dreams and nightmares. Like as soon as you would feel pain, you wake up.
Yeah.
That's what it's saying.
But I mean, like I've been beheaded in nightmares, and like my head rolls around, I'm still there, and I can still feel that I've been dropped to the ground. Like my head's rolling around, and I'm still like looking around.
Cool.
Like, and I would think that's where my dream ends, but no, I'm about to be like grabbed by the headless horseman from who was Christopher Walken's character in Sleepy Hollow. I had a vivid nightmare where I was being chased by the headless horseman from the movie Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp and Christopher Walken. And I got decapitated, and my body fell, and my head kept rolling, and I was my head, and then I saw the headless horseman walk over to me and grab my head and toss it into a basket full of other heads.
Neat.
And I thought as soon as I got beheaded, the dream would be over. But nope, I kept following that story, that plot line.
Well then.
Yeah. So, I guess what I'm trying to say here is like, again, you're right. Like that, all those examples you gave would snap somebody out of it, but it wouldn't 100%.
Yeah, but I guess the thing is that there's a percent chance it happens, so I guess he's really unlucky.
Yeah.
That he just kept going.
Mm-hmm.
And you were unlucky because it kept talking about a dream in this creepypasta.
Alright. Yeah. My next actual thought here is when he's having trouble finding any information about the game. I feel like he would have more information, like potentially developer's name or a copyright notice, because a lot of DS games have that copyright and then the name of the company, and even a credit section potentially. If we're talking regular style games, which would yield much better results.
Which we aren't.
Yeah, this was before it was revealed.
Fair.
But if you looked up a game title and there was just nothing on it at all, would you bother looking up the developer?
Well, yes, because it's another avenue to potentially find information.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. If you're caring enough to look it up, you're caring enough to look deeper.
Yeah, like even Polybius has a fake or a hoaxed game company.
What are you talking about?
Behind
That
it.
game is real.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I play it every day. I love it.
But moving on, Mikey.
All right, and here's a quote from when I was still really hoping it was going to be supernatural.
Yeah.
So, I had taken in the environment and realized that my character was surrounded by blank white walls, which were similar in appearance to the ones I found in my DS camera roll. So, at which point, basically, I thought to myself, if there's not new picture me on the DS camera, I will be disappointed.
And you were disappointed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
because wouldn't that be interesting if he went to the spot in the game that had the white walls, and then all of a sudden, in his photos, there's pictures of him as
Yeah,
he
that would
is.
be. You were hoping for a Tron, or for like not maybe not necessarily a Tron scenario, but like a sort of you get a photo taken in the game, you get a photo taken in real life.
And do you mean a photo of him as college Jeremy standing with a white background with the shot from above? Or do you mean a photo of him, like, from the DS's perspective, looking at him as he's playing the game?
From above.
Yeah, that's kind of how I figured
I figured
it
as
was,
well,
because
but I want
like
to clarify.
yeah, that would be really creepy. Like if this had gone like a more supernatural angle of the cartridge, so it's just like maybe like there's a part of me that wanted this game cartridge to just be like a weird mystery, like a supernatural mystery thing, where it's like it's actually like a kind of like a moving. It starts off like you think it's creepy and like it's the bad guy, but it's actually just like a supernatural coping mechanism for victims that have to deal with that dealt with this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Sort of like Jeremy's not the first person that this is like, because again he doesn't remember how he got a hold of it and stuff like that. So it's like there early on I was wondering if this game cartridge itself was like going to be like some kind of like supernatural tool for coping with this kind of trauma.
So you mean it's something developed by the SNTF?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the Supernatural Task Force,
The best task force.
Mm-hmm. But no, we got a much more creepy and down to earth horror story.
My next quote here. When Mr. O told me not to tell anyone about him, it invoked something deep within my gut. It was the exact same feeling that overcame me whenever I thought of telling my mother about Mr. O's presence in the game. At which my thought is, if telling people about Mr. O gives Jeremy a terrible feeling, why isn't he feeling it whenever he's posting these entries?
That is kind of true, actually. Like, because I understand what he's saying there. Like, it definitely works, but that is kind of like that. Maybe should be mentioned as like the same feeling I'm having right now every time I bring it up in these blog entries. Or maybe maybe he could have like mentioned something like maybe the reasons why I'm not getting that feeling now is because I'm not directly confronting somebody and telling them about this, and like kind of give us a little bit of like not a thesis, but like sort of like a bit of philosophy on like the idea of blogs being sort of like an indirect communication device to a wider audience. Because I think I think I just sort of came with that, like thought of that in the like right now, of the idea of the reason why he's not feeling that now is because this is an indirect way of telling the story, or this is an indirect way of communicating, versus going to talk, like thinking about talking to his mom about it. Like that's a direct, like that's confrontation, and people hate confrontation.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that help, or does that that?
Yeah, that helps.
Okay.
So my next quote here. He was no ghost, and he wasn't my imaginary friend. To which my response is, damn it, I was hoping for a ghost.
Yeah, I was like, damn it. I was hoping for Slender Man, skeevier cousin. Not gonna lie, the description of Mr. O right at the beginning, like until the smile showed up, I was like, Slender Man?
Yeah, a little bit. Like the first description of him was a little slendery.
Yeah, like looming over the character, bald. But then there was that smile. I was like, well, is it just a smile on his face? Is he just Smile Man?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Then we got more expression, and it was like, okay, this is again. Then we spiraled into the rest of the story, or then we followed the rest of the story. It was like, nope, no supernatural bullshit. Damn it.
All right. So my last actual thought here isn't really an actual thought. It's just a misreading that I thought was hilarious.
Okay.
So the quote misread is, "He whipped his eyes with his arm and sighed."
Oh God.
Right in the eyes.
Fuck. Oh.
But the actual quote is, "He wiped his eyes with his arm and sighed."
Oh. He flogged his eyeballs with his arm. Yeah. That does add a little bit of funniness when misread.
My go. Let's see. Some words swing down saying magic XX / X's house inscribed into it. My head down, cringing. The glory of a child's imagination. Weird and specific like that. Like an Xbox gamer tag that has to be unique.
I don't know. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's sort of an edgelordy name, but like, I guess that's maybe like that was the point, maybe.
And maybe like he wanted to put like triple X because it's like a porn thing, but he couldn't, so he had to go XX / X.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, like maybe the save file is also created. Maybe everything, like none of this is customized by Jeremy. It's all Mr. O.
Yeah,
just super fucking gross.
It kind of goes nowhere too, like the whole name. Because like, what if like dark magic, quote unquote, was something that like a game that they played, like in real life,
like Magic,
no,
the Gathering.
I'm referring
or like,
to pedophilic things.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
See, I was also thinking like it could be also be like Yu-Gi-Oh! I think was around the early 2000s, so maybe it was like Dark Magician was like the popular Yu-Gi-Oh! Card from what I remember.
I have no idea.
But yeah.
Either way, the name went nowhere. It doesn't necessarily have to go anywhere, but it was weird how like specific and unique it had to be instead of just being like Jeremy's house.
Hey man. Maybe that's just all it is. Maybe it didn't need to go anywhere. It's just like he was just reminiscing. He's like, oh man, that was really cringe back then, right? To have this weird name.
It could have been like Darth Jeremy. It's like, oh,
yeah, exactly, or Darth Jer. But yeah, no. Like, honestly, that to me, like, it's sort of just flavor text of like him reminiscing of nostalgia because like that's sort of how the story, like that's sort of the jumping off point for the stories. Like horror is like he's reminiscing on like this. His past, and then he finds something dark,
and it's magical.
Damn it! I was really hoping you were going to do that, but yep, here we are.
Hello, my name is the Gamer in Yellow. Nice to meet you. So anyways, moving on. I made my way over to the dresser near my bed. I clicked it, causing the drawer to open, revealing a stash of items inside: an apple, a magnet, 50 gold, and a journal, all laid actually within the drawer. Does anyone else think it's weird that his house is still lootable? Like, the dresser was stocked like a normal loot container you'd find out in the world. Like, heck, it's set up like it's a tutorial giving him a quest hook and some starting items that he will probably need soon. He did not use the items, but probably.
To counter, this is a save file, and that could just be his personal chest, like his personal holding area.
But like, maybe there's some sort of like, yeah, I get it. Maybe there's some sort of inventory limiter in this game. I had this written down as a response because I figured you were going to say that. To explain why he put the items away. But like gold, in most games, especially the kids ones, you just get money and it goes into a waitlist number that's in your inventory.
Fair,
because it seems kind of
I don't know
hardcore for a kids game to have. You can only carry so much gold on you. That being said, Zelda does that with rupees, so fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Get fucked.
Either way, it was weird.
I also don't know enough about Animal Crossing to like really talk about like the game mechanics of this
It's
game.
true. I could have done a deep dive and found out how they do their inventory and money management, but spoilers, I finished reading this about like an hour before we recorded, maybe even less than that. So I did not have time.
Just gonna slow clap here.
I did it. I was busy. Moving on. I was giddy to read through the ramblings of a kid without a care in the world. And then the first journal entry happens where he's talking about Mr. O. And then it continues.
I thought for sure you were talking. I was like, I was giddy to read this story.
No, I'm quoting the story.
Like right after saying that you had like just read the story like
That's true.
2 hours
Okay, that was a weird break. Continuing with my next thought, here's the quote. I was giddy to read through the ramblings of a kid without a care in the world. Then the first journal entry happens where he talks about Mr. O. I'm not going to bother repeating it because it's relevant. And then it continues by saying, Mr. O, maybe he was not an old teacher of mine? I can't remember. So I shrugged and exited the journal. So is like quote unquote giddy excitement sure wore off quick with a single journal entry. Like, and this is in regards to what I was talking about before. It's a journal which would theoretically have multiple pages. So to me, it kind of seemed like he's like, yes, I'm going to read a whole bunch of weird shit that I wrote as a kid. Yeah, he reads the first entry. He's like, well, that's enough. I'm not going to bother turning the pages. Moving on.
sure.
Cool. So, anyways,
I don't know what to. I don't know what to respond with. How to respond? Fine. It's like
your notes are so good, they're leaving you speechless. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on. So there's an in-game computer sat in the dining table, and expecting it revealed the character creation option. I was able to create and insert characters into my world as I pleased. Selecting the character creation option, I revealed I'd only created Mr. O. It was just him and I in this world alone. So first off, how would he know that only he and Mr. O are alone in the world? He hasn't played this game in 10 or 20 years. Like, I haven't played Animal Crossing, but I know Animal Crossing has NPCs in the world already created, as most games do. And yes, I know what happened at the end. I'm writing this in time.
I think that's what we need to have here is like, this is written, these comments are coming in like as you're reading the story.
However, why would he assume that anyways? So, like, the way that the game is described right now, it's not necessarily a Animal Crossing-like game. It's more of a make-your-own game, not as an Animal Crossing clone, because Animal Crossing is you're doing shit and there's characters you interact with and all that, but none of that is happening in this.
Yeah, it's almost like again, maybe this is why I kept getting confused with like the pixel versus that, because I kept imagining this is like almost RPG Maker sort of situation, like it's like some weird customizable game.
Yep. And had a section down here for when review cultist counters, because I figured you were going to counter on this one as well.
Wow, you put way too much faith
apparently.
in me.
Yeah, it was basically.
What was I supposed to counter? What was I going to counter
it's
with?
not an Animal Crossing clone. It's just some other game.
But then I tricked you and agreed with you.
I don't know what to do now.
This is like it's three-dimensional chess. Wow.
Yeah, but
I'm kind of impressed, also sad that we are getting to this point where like we are writing down counter notes,
preemptive counters
to each other's like. We know that each other are going to like counter each other, and then when it doesn't happen, it's like I have a bunch of notes that I wrote down
I was
to
not
counter
prepared
you.
for a non-counter,
And I was not prepared for a non-committal response.
My whole point I'm going to continue with is basically, it's not the game that is being shown isn't a normal game, because why have obscure, seemingly useless inventory items like a magnet that's there for a very specific purpose, like trying to like tying to a string and to pull a key out of a hole or something. But in that situation, why would that situation even arise if the world is empty and void of NPCs? It's basically Minecraft DS. He's alone in his house that he made with an NPC that he made. No NPCs in the world outside. There may or may not be enemies out there. Based on his just him and I in this world quote, I'd think not even that. So it's even less of a game than Minecraft at that point.
Yeah, like unless those items they got, like the apple and the magnet and stuff, were supposed to be used to get through other special like levels and stuff like that Mr. O had planned. Or maybe they're there just to kind of like throw, like to make it seem like it's a standard game, like a game that like he think that like that Jeremy would play as a kid. So like, but then like there's actually just other ways that like again he has to interact with Mr. O every time he wants to like unlock these certain areas.
Maybe that's
right?
why the items are just in his dresser, because he carried them around for a while. It's like, I can't even use these on anything. I'll just store these.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Possible. So then after the character creation description and everything, exiting the computer and turning around, I was shocked to see Mr. O standing behind me, mere pixels away from my character. As I backed away, his body stayed perfectly still, only moving his head to keep his watchful gaze fixated upon me. So at that point, at least for a brief moment, I'm guessing that he's a ghost in the game. He's not, but I was guessing he was.
No.
Because he's doing weird, creepy, stalkery things that a game wouldn't do.
I mean, I have heard some stories out of Animal Crossing, and that have actually become creepypastas as a result of like a weird, creepy character that pops up in your game or something like that if you like turn the lights on and off like a certain amount of times at a certain day, a certain time at night or something like that. Like I recall like there being like
you do a creepypasta ritual to summon him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's practically like a video game like urban legend creepypasta. But like yeah, so I know that there are some spooky, creepy things about Earthbound, about maybe that's the game I was thinking of while playing while reading the story. Maybe. Was Earthbound. Again with the pixelation and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, with Animal Crossing, yeah. Also, like I was trying to like the best visualization I got with like when like he was shocked that this character was behind him was I guess like when he logs onto the computer in the game, it like zooms up the screen so that you're just seeing that like the menu like the like a screen system like a screen interface, and then when you like you zoom back out of it and like saying you're back in the room, that would be kind of unnerving if like when you're playing a game like this and like you pop out of like the hack like I can see it like in like Fallout and stuff when you're doing a hacking like of a terminal and you go into like the screen, hack the terminal, it's like all right I did it, and then like as soon as you zoom out and like you're in you go into a third person mode, there's a guy right behind you.
Dude, I've witnessed this multiple times. I've been in Warframe looking through the market. I get out of the menu, I turn around, and the man on the wall sitting on the desk right behind me.
Oh, that's fucking terrifying. Yeah, 100%.
It's a thing.
Yeah, I remember that too. I remember like looking at something and then like turning around, it's like, hello, like in a creeped out way. It's like, hello. Yeah.
Either way, moving on from there. It gets to the end of the chapter 1, saying this page is awaiting further updates. Check back once in a while to catch the next one. So I'm wondering if this page has actually been updated and added to over time. Like that's where it actually stopped the first draft, and then it went on a few days, or maybe even the next day he continued writing. Like it was actually a day-by-day full immersion ARG situation.
Oh, so yeah, it was an ARG setup. That could have been it. Like that might have happened. Icydice, if you're listening to this, and you've gotten this far, yeah, was this an ARG before, or was this was this all done up as a story like that you formatted like a blog?
And I wonder if the specific wording of this page is awaiting further updates was taken from a blog website that he used as like inspiration, or if that's just fully made up and just it is what it is.
Oh, the caption like between each entry?
If that's actually pulled from another website, or if it's just made up. Because I don't read blogs. I don't know how their formatting works.
Yeah, I only know blogs in so far as like some of the creepypastas that we've done. So, yeah, inquiring minds want to know.
And also mine. So, moving on. I asked her about Mr. O, and upon doing so, I could have sworn I saw her smile fade a bit. She relaxed back into the seat and looked towards the ceiling, pondering for a while before I could ask her what she was thinking. She abruptly looked me in the eye and told me that he was an imaginary friend of mine, confirming my suspicions. And the way I answer that is, I think that raises more suspicions than confirms. You're sitting there silently thinking, then abruptly looks you eye to the eye and be like, he's an imaginary friend. Forget about it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
They living in Derpland here?
Yeah, it's sort
You
of...
should be very aware of that.
You know what? Honestly, I honestly can't give that a Derpland, because that happened. I have experienced that. Where, like, you tell somebody not to do something there, and futilely hoping that they're gonna not do it, but, like, ultimately, no, that just helps pique their interest. It just makes them want to do it more.
I understand that, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
Jeremy, because his mother waited for a second to think about it and then said that he's an imaginary friend, Jeremy continues as if, oh, okay, that cleared up everything. Everything's fine. Meanwhile, that response is sketchy as all hell.
Oh, wait, so he does decide to, like, all right, fine, I won't follow it any further. But then he does it because he keeps doing it, because he's like, it's almost like he's also, like, he's putting on an act. He's like, oh yeah, Mom, okay, I won't look into this anymore. I'm gonna go upstairs and just look at stuff now.
Way later on, he looks into it after he goes back into the game and shit gets more fucked up. But yeah, maybe it's a result of the conditioning that he didn't want to push the matter. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe between the conditioning and, you know, the his unconscious shame of the situation, like that he said he experienced whenever he'd, like, deal with, like, talking about this subject. Like, sort of a combination of that. Like, again, like, right now he's in, like, almost like a denial, like, kind of a partial denial stage.
Yeah, because this was very early on. Like, this is chapter 2 here.
Yeah.
Because the way that this would normally work, if you're asking someone about this, if you ask your mom, who is this character, was the imaginary friend of mine, she should probably just go, yeah, he was your imaginary friend. Like, just immediately, instead of thinking they're having to dwell about what to say to him.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, some people would do that. Again, like, yes and no.
Surprise!
Like, different people do different things. So, like, I can see, like, yeah, you're right. Like, somebody like should do, like, it's like, yeah, no, it was just your imaginary friend. That's totally it. But then, like, there are other people that might take a little bit, might feign too much time, or, like, again, people aren't perfect. Like, it's not always going to be the perfect scenario. So, and that's honestly how stories sort of, like, meander. It's like, so, like, this person, like the mom, maybe remembers back to that time, which, if you remember, was also the time when her that started basically started her husband down the path of committing suicide. So, like, maybe she's, like, in that time she's thinking, she's not just thinking about, like, what she's going to say to him, but maybe she's also thinking on, like, that terrible shit, that the whole circumstance. So
then continuing, and that's just a bit as to why I appeared unhappy in the last couple of photos. She told me that sometimes as a child there were days where I just didn't seem to have my spark, as she put it. Which kind of begs the question this is me now. Which kind of begs the question as to why she took a picture of her child sad. Like, was it a picture of him at Disney World or something, or during some event that, like, she just kind of had to take pictures because she was there? Just kind of depressing, you know, to just take a picture of him just there, sad.
I hate to keep. I don't mean to keep countering you, but, like, my mom is constantly taking photos of us against our will. like I like every fucking time. Like, like during the summer, during the winter, like, as soon as, like, we're all here together, like, she is taking photos, much to the chagrin of my sisters.
Yeah, I guess so.
So it's just something that the parents sometimes do.
That's fair enough.
Just, like, they want to remember, I guess.
Regardless whether or not people want to have the picture taken or not. We weren't a very picture-centric household over here, so it was a very different environment, I suppose.
That's fair. Again, different. I guess this different strokes for different folks, or, like, different, like, again, different living conditions, different the way people do different.
Almost
things.
Like we're different people.
Almost like. There we go. That also needs to be on a slogan.
This is one of them
for us.
Add to the list of slogans we have.
Yeah.
Moving on, though. The typical intro played, and I selected my last save file, whereas it resumed my journey. And then at that point, I'm like, well, that means the intro is going to change and be worse and worse as the story goes on. Spoiler / foreshadowing, I suppose. It didn't, but it could have. It seemed like that's what it was foreshadowing. What was it, Ben Drowned? Or was it a different one where every time you boot up the game, it got like creepier and creepier?
You just described Vigipasta tropes
in general.
In general, like Ben Drowned, a Pokepasta, any number of Pokepastas we've done.
Do that?
I think Ben Drowned did that to a degree. Petscop, I think, did that as well.
Sonic probably did it.
Yeah, Sonic. Again, it is a trope in the video game creepypasta genre.
Mm-hmm.
So,
in the school, he's like going around exploring every single room, and then like, of course, the one room that he didn't explore before going into the bathroom trap was the one that's called Mr. O.
Yeah. Well, you can't get into that one because it's locked.
But it might have been open before the bathroom trap stuff, though. We don't know.
Oh, that's true.
He went everywhere else before, apparently.
Yeah. I also wonder if that one would what would have happened if Mr. O had like that sprite that was following him had like come over and he like interacted with him, like at that door, like would it have opened and like would he have found out what was
also
in there?
That's the reason why I assumed it was the principal or something, because like he had his own locked door. Meanwhile, all the other ones were wide open.
Mm-hmm. But then why did Jeremy have a single classroom to himself? That honestly could have gotten really creepy too. It's like the special room that the principal has for certain children. Like fuck, that's so much worse. Like we've oh fuck, that could be so creepy.
But moving on, he plugs in the charger to the DS. I'm like, yay! It doesn't have infinite battery life. Awesome. At least one thing doesn't. Okay, so the mom is like asking why Jeremy brought up Mr. O, and this is the quote. All right, first things first. My mother confronted me earlier. She had some questions regarding what reminded me of Mr. O. She found it peculiar that I remembered a person I hadn't spoke to of for years, but she initially forgot to ask me about it due to her fatigue after a long day at work. I told her about the drawing I found in the cardboard box. I neglected to mention that he was omnipresent in the game, however. And then to that makes me kind of think that the hand, like in the moment, of course it didn't, made me think that maybe the mom had a hand in this because of how like sketchy she's being about all this, neglecting to talk about the creepiness of the game and all like, that is a hook for later.
Yeah, I mean, she did, but it wasn't the reason you expected it. Like it wouldn't. It was that like she was involved in this situation from the victim side as much as much as Jeremy and them, because like again, she's the parent of the victim.
And moving on, it goes on into these. I'm not going to bother reading all these. It goes into 3 very short paragraphs of basically the mom saying the same thing, being suspicious as to what he knows and doesn't know, and it's really ham-fisted, honestly. It just keeps saying the same thing over and over. The mom is suspicious. It's like it's something I already had in my mind from chapters ago. Like I caught onto it a long time ago, and then now it's just repeating it and beating it into my skull. It's like I know, I get it. She's suspicious. I know. It's just a little much.
Yeah. Okay.
And then he gets on to responding to a commenter, and talking about his backstory of his father because someone asked. And I do like that there's the collaboration between an apparent commenter and the story being told. And I wonder if it actually was a real commenter.
Again, it kind of goes back to like, was this an ARG before, or was this done live and then it's now been archived? Because that's sort of the style of Reddit no sleep stories. Is like it's why there's like multi-parter Reddit no sleep stories, is because like the person writes the initial like seed story or like element of the story, then lets the commenters theorize and like give suggestions, and then they take some of those ideas and even respond to them in the next entry or in the next part. Because again, those ones are often like, "Hey, my dad's been possessed by a demon. He's acting strange. Can you help me out on this?" Yeah, that's the whole title.
Yeah. But moving on. This quote-unquote imaginary friend of mine doesn't seem quite as imaginary as I first understood him to be. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't think of many alternative explanations. And to me, it's just like, I already considered that a long time ago. Maybe it's my mundaneness of my brain, but I often view stories mundanely. I think about that option first. So these reveals weren't working for me because it was stuff I already thought about ages ago.
Yeah.
Well, he gets on talking to Sammy, and Sammy says, like, I know about the game and I know who made it. And it kind of made it sound like both him and Sammy had the games and were playing them, which made me assume that both him and Jeremy were abused as kids by this Mr. O. And the game was used to condition both of them.
Yeah.
But it was only Jeremy.
Honestly,
right?
yeah. Yeah, no, Sammy was affected by this, like, because, like, his dad was the monster. But, like, like, I honestly, when I first got into the story, reading, like, and we heard about Sammy, and, like, Sammy's a kid that he doesn't remember at all, and stuff like that, and then, like, his mom vaguely remembers that he was a friend that he had. I honestly thought that Sammy, like, again, like how I mentioned earlier, like, this, like, why does Sammy keep popping up in these stories about missing people? Like, was Sammy the one that didn't get away from whatever happened in their past?
Yeah, the reason that I thought that maybe they were both being abused the same way is because, like, Sammy was always smiling in his pictures, and sometimes Jeremy wasn't. That might be because Sammy never disobeyed Mr. O, so he was never, like, slapped. And, like, because he was like, the reason that he has a picture of him post slap is because he was disobeying. So Mr. O took a picture of it on his DS, so Jeremy would be reminded of what happens when he disobeys him. That's the way I took it.
Yeah. Fuck. That's
I don't know what that says about my brain.
I mean, dude, we read horror stories about, like, a range of, like, traumas and creepy, skeevy shit. So, like, it's our wheelhouse, unfortunately, at this point.
Early on, so, and that's the last of my thoughts. That's fine, because the very last thing we were talking about anyway, so we can move on.
Okay, so on to final thoughts. Reading this story was a bit of a journey for me. It started off seeming to be a blog formatted standard Icydice, where someone finds their old haunted game cartridge, perhaps. Ooh, weird things happening in the game. But then we get this mystery that quickly unravels a terrible childhood trauma that protagonist Jeremy experienced and repressed. Sort of in the vein of other stories that we've touched on, like 1999, Baraska, and even Pen Pal. And then it gives us this ending with a glimmer of hope for the victims involved, at least in this story. Like, as far as the ones that are involved in this story, that Jeremy is putting down in his blog entries, and, like, where they've come to accept the trauma and the situation that they went through, and proceed to move forward in life, not letting the trauma control them. It's a risky gamble to have a happy ending to a horror story, but for me, it wasn't unwelcome in this instance. I was glad to have the ending the way it was.
It kind of would have been cliche if it was just like, I was never the same and I was admitted into a mental institution.
Yeah, exactly. Or like it does have a little bit of bittersweetness because, like, his mom's relationship with him has been, like, ruined because he doesn't feel like he can trust her anymore.
It's just kind of,
but, like,
a little shaky, but it's not like they're not talking to each other anymore.
It's strange, yeah, exactly. Like, well, when he first started writing about that, I thought, I was like, like, this has completely destroyed your relationship because your mom tried to protect you, like, lied to you by trying to protect you. But then, as it goes on, like, he sort of, like, kind of mellows out about it, and, like, it's still, like, it's strained. It's going to take some work to get that trust recovered, but like, that whole situation again, like, it's still bittersweet. It's still a bit of a bittersweet ending, but there's a glimmer of hope to this horror story. And there were some things that I got very uncomfortable about. But and like I said, like the child molestation stuff like that is very uncomfortable. But that's the point of horror, and it was done tastefully. as you, at least as much as tasteful as you can do with this kind of subject matter. Like nothing was gone. Nothing. I don't think there was ever anything in. It was all really implied, or it was like not shown. Like it wasn't like fully shown, like the extent of what happened. It was just sort of like it's all through like emotional damage and like a couple of hints from like some photos, but nothing is blatantly shown.
No, honestly,
thankfully.
it's so subtle, it almost doesn't need the not safe for work warning. Almost.
Yeah, because they almost
have a
never
trigger
say
warning for that, for childhood drama.
Yes.
But
Yeah. Like it's not until basically Sammy straight up goes out and says that his dad is in jail for child molestation charges. Like, but it's only that point. But everything else around the story, like it sort of hints at. It doesn't straight up say. It kind of leaves you to like, we're not going to say it specifically throughout the story, but you know what's going on. And it's just sort of like, honestly, it kind of makes it's not exposition, I don't think, what Sam does, but like it's basically like when Sam brings it up that his dad was arrested for child molestation and child pornography and stuff. That almost like it's driven home even harder because of all the subtlety of the rest of the story. Like it's sort of like the story is helping to build that up. Like when you finally hear like the truth of what it, like when you finally hear it, or when you finally read it, it's just like, yep, there it is. there's the painful truth of the situation. Because like you were all thinking it, then Sammy said it. But yeah, all in all, the journey was rather interesting to me. I dare say enjoyable by the end. And it definitely uses the themes of Icydice and even the title itself to great lengths for this story. Like this was a nostalgia trip gone wrong. This was a story about a nostalgia trip. And again, like that's sort of what video game pastas and like creepypastas that deal with like childhood things getting twisted. Like that's all what it's all about. Is like taking something that you remember from your childhood and making it and making it scary in some horrible way. That's one of the reasons why people like that stuff in creepypastas. So, I don't know what that says about me, but that's why I like creepypasta sometimes. It's like taking these childhood things and just twisting them. So, for that, I will recommend this story.
Also, in my previous mention where I jumped in saying that what's it called? My brain isn't working today.
Warning?
What was that? Oh, the trigger warning. I said childhood drama. It probably should be childhood trauma or something like that, not drama. I said the wrong word. Yes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, trauma. Yeah.
I think I said
trauma.
drama.
Okay.
I may have meant trauma. Maybe it sounded like trauma. So maybe I'm just saying nothing for no reason. Maybe this will be edited out. Maybe it won't. Either way, continue.
Mikey, the E stands for evil. Your verdict and recommendation.
Alright, so as the story went on, I wanted this to be supernatural in some way, but all we got was the digital camera that has a magical battery.
That's it. That's all it is.
Yeah. So, yeah, when reading this, you do get the point they come across, and you know what's coming, even though you don't want it to be what it is. It ends up being what it is.
Yeah.
Like you really catch on to the grooming / weirdness of the video game. And then once it's revealed that, oh yeah, the one guy's father was sent to prison, it's like, oh.
Oh no.
Um,
or it's like, yeah, that's Yeah, that's about the size of it.
Yeah. So overall, I'm only going to give it a partial recommendation. Like, it does deal with the subject matter well, so that gives it points, but
Mhm.
the dream sequence just should have ended sooner.
You,
Very strict.
yeah. Okay, so we know everyone as of this episode. We now know everyone's major like hard pass on creepypasta subjects. Like for me, it's past tense, present tense stuff like that. Like that irks me to no end. For you, gamer, it's like how a story is immersive, and for Mikey, it's dream sequences
In general,
in
they should not
stories.
exist.
Just
Yeah.
cannot stand them. But you know what? I accept you. And then I guess on to gamer.
Okay. Well, for me, reading through it, it was extremely predictable for me, unfortunately. It's like I had the GPS open, so like I saw all the twists and turns on the road ahead of me long before they showed up.
Really, you're gonna go with a GPS example and not like an FAQ or a or a like a let's play like
No,
a
because
walkthrough.
I'm not a weak little bitch that has to look up walkthroughs on how to beat a game before I play it.
Wow, shots fired.
I look up walkthroughs after the fact when I struggle and fail on it, and I have to go back and find out why. That's
Review
fine.
cultists will remember this.
That being said, it was creepy, and in honestly the most immersive way it could be. Real life shit. Like while Mikey was sad
Yeah.
that it didn't go
Yeah.
supernatural, I'm happy it didn't go supernatural because it's way spookier this way. The lack of the game being
Mhm.
real was explained, so it's a one-off that the pedophile made. Great. I mean, it's not great, but it makes sense. I understand now. The mother's lack of cooperation
Yeah.
with giving
Yeah.
information was explained to bury the problem so it wouldn't affect her son growing up and all that. Great, that's explained. Pretty much everything was explained and neatly tied up, and I appreciate that. It was a huh?
So sorry. I just so all of your comments that you were like going to like why is it like since they were all in
the
since they were
moment.
all in like in the moment while you were reading the story, like your final thought is basically it's like all of my notes
No, hell
basically go
no.
away by the
It's
end
a
of the story.
clean. The story as it is a
Yeah.
clean and complete story, but it's not without flaws. The Google Hangout
Yes.
section needs to be
Of
named
course.
for each dialogue, for example. And it needs to be
Yeah,
way more subtle with the clues along the way. Because, at least for me personally, like I said, I knew exactly what was going to happen by the end. Not exactly 100%, because I thought it was going to be a teacher or the principal or something. But most of it I kind of got long before there was the reveal. So the reveal was not very revealing to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I feel like for this story, like the big mystery or the big takeaway mystery for me was trying to figure out who done it.
Yeah.
Like I think it's like I think the story was like, all right, yeah, like early on, this is probably like this is going down a very dark path for this kid's like childhood. So now we got to figure out who done this. Like that's the actual mystery of the story.
Yeah,
is who
but
done it.
just because I saw everything so far ahead of time, it made the character seem like incompetent in a way because he can't get what's happening. It has to be ham-fisted for him to understand.
I think part of it again, like you're forgetting that he's repressed all these memories. Like he doesn't remember this game. He doesn't remember what happened. He doesn't even remember Sam until it's brought up.
Yeah, but
Until a
using
photo
the words
is brought
that
up.
he says,
So like,
I get it. So
Mhm.
he should get it too because he has that
Okay.
plus more context on top of that.
I think he's denying. I think for a good portion of the story, like again, like honestly, I caught it while he was doing the paranormal stuff. Where he was trying to hammer down, like this has got to be some kind of like haunted game or something. There's paranormal game or something like that. And I was like, or you're just denying it. Like you're denying what's actually going on. like he doesn't want to actually like subconsciously like in the writing he doesn't want to hear that. Like he doesn't want to actually like he doesn't want to actually confront what happened. And I kind of picked that up while in the writing.
Either way, For me, overall, I'll still give it a
yeah.
light recommendation because it was creepy in a way that 90% of the supernatural horror stories out there they can't be, and that's in believability. Because as soon as there's a weird monster or whatever, superpowers, any of that shit, it's lost its believability. But this can be fully believed, and it could be an actual story that actually happened.
Yeah, and that's what makes it. Yeah, it's like real.
It's a video game creepypasta, but not really, because it doesn't dwell on it, and it's not being locked to being a video game like Let's Play to tell the story. The video game's there to assist, and it is a pivotal part of this story, but it's not the entirety of the story. I just wish everything was more subtle. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But yeah, like this was definitely a bait and switch, I think. For like, we thought it was a Vigipasta. Turns out it was actually about human trauma or about childhood trauma. I mean, that's what most Vigipastas are about, but this one like ramped it up. It's like it made that the actual
interesting
focus.
Thing about this. This is a story that has a video game in it. That is a horror story, and yes, you could turn the game off, and the stuff in the game isn't affecting you, but the stuff you learn from the game does affect you, because it's like opening up a history book to your past life that you didn't know about. Compared to other creepypastas where it's like, there's a Pikachu and he's bleeding, and then you turn the screen off and he's gone.
because you never healed him. Like the last time you saved, you left all your Pokemon incredibly injured, and so the wounds have just festered for 10 years. And then you just turn it off and like that's it. Like unless like someone's like you start being affected by that for some reason, like you start remembering like your like your dog that you didn't like that died or something, like it needs like those kind of stories. I feel like need to ramp up something to like we've said this tons of times. Like these games creepypastas need to like ramp up the out of game experience more than just I feel sad
the same
now.
way when I play Resident Evil. It's a scary game, sure. That's
what it was supposed to do.
If you have the flexibility of writing a creepypasta, make it affect the characters in it, aside from it just being, I saw a spooky thing. Because if that's fine, then you could just write a creepypasta about a character sitting down and watching the Paranormal Activity movies and having his freaking thoughts on it. Like it's a Narrativman reacts to series, and that would be acceptable. Well, it's not.
Yeah.
I'm saying that like I'm targeting this story that we're reading, but I'm not, because this story is the opposite.
No, but this is the this is the story that's like, no, this is what you should do when you're doing this. Like ramp up the out of game experience for the player that's dealing with the game. Yeah, no, 100%. Like if like either the game needs to be the vessel or like the vehicle for the horror. It either has to be the whole setup needs to be in game, like as like put the horror in the game's setting, or have the game be the vehicle for some kind of horror or trauma that the player suddenly realizes they have or given, and ramp it up, like because you have that ability as a writer, as a creative writing thing. And again, we're not attacking this story for that. We're saying we're giving this story praise for doing that. At least me and Gamer are. I'm not sure. Mikey, are you still? Mikey still might be out on that.
He doesn't care.
Yeah. And again, I definitely feel for Mikey's situation. Like I mentioned in our Jeff the Killer one, like I was glad that there was some supernatural element to it. And again, I remember back on like our first couple of episodes, me and Dr. Leviathan had the same kind of situation where like we did Jeff the Killer, and I like some of the supernatural. Or no, we did 1999. And I wanted there to be a supernatural element in that story because it was a little real and was at the time. And Dr. Leviathan was like, he was glad that it wasn't supernatural element because it is invoking this real world horror, and it makes it that much more scary because it's something that could actually happen. So, honestly, that's I think the story's greatest strength is the fact that they've made it that much. They've made it real.
Some of the scariest things are actually in history books.
So.
That kind of deal, right? You know, like real things are scariest.
What is it? You pick history long enough, it bleeds weird.
I haven't heard that, but that's cool.
Got that from Robin D. Laws from Ken and Robin Talk About Stuff. They're an interesting podcast. Anyway, moving on. So yours was you're
I'm giving it a light
recommending, right,
recommendation.
gamer?
I feel like it should be a lot more subtle.
Okay, fair enough. Well, that's still roughly 2.5 out of 3. So, if you like what you heard, or if you didn't, if you're still with us, God bless. Which God? Well, Yaya Cthulhu Fatagan. And you can leave a comment in the comment section below where this gets posted, whether it be on Podbean, Facebook, YouTube, or Tumblr. You can send us emails at aldenterigamortis@gmail.com. That's ALDENTERIGAMORTIS@gmail.com. Where you can also leave us suggestions for other creepypastas, spooky things, cryptids. You creep it, we'll peep it. And if you'd like to talk to us, we're on Twitter. Mikey is at the E stands for evil. The Gamer in Yellow is at the Gamer in Yellow, but without that W because his name is very long. And I'm at Review Cultist. You can also support our show financially by going to Patreon. Look up El Dente Rigor Mortis and select the backer tier you'd like to support us at. We have $2 and $5 tier with special episodes, early access, extra content. For our patrons already helping support the show, thank you guys immensely. You're helping keep those hosting bills at bay. And as always, we very much appreciate that. And for listeners of our show and the authors of these stories, thank you guys immensely. Because without your listenership, it would be like screaming into the void. And without your stories that you've written and shared online, Icydice, who sent us an email requesting us to talk about this story, we really wouldn't have much of a show because we'd have nothing to talk about. So thank you all. Until next time, I have been your host, Review Cultist.
I'm Mikey. The E stands for evil.
I'm the Gamer in Yellow.
And this has been Al Dente Rigor Mortis. Sleep well.